so my internet could go down. We're reading. This part was boring about definitions. We last left off, it was this boring part about definitions. Let's see here. I don't know, I'll just fucking start somewhere. Nothing equals the perfection of our war machines. Warships and warplanes are vastly more perfect than their counterparts in civilian life. The organization of the Army, its transport, supplies, administration, is much more precise than a civilian organization. The smallest error in the realm of war would cost countless lives and would be measured in terms of victory or defeat. What is yield there? Very poor on the whole. Where is the productivity? There is none. Vincent, in his definition, likewise refers to productivity. Technical progress is the relative variation in world production in a given sphere between two given periods. This definition, useful of course from the economic point of view, leads him at once into a dilemma. He is obliged to distinguish technical progress from progress of technique, which corresponds to the progress of techniques in all fields, and to distinguish these two from technical progress, properly speaking, which concerns variations in productivity. This is an interface made from natural phenomena, for, in his definition, Vincent is obliged to recognize that technical progress includes natural phenomenon, the greater or lesser richness of an ore, of the soil, etc. By definition, the very contrary of technique. Shit. I'm gonna make some more tea. These linguistic acrobatics and hair splittings suffice to prove the insanity of such a definition, which aims at a single aspect of technical progress and includes elements which do not belong to technique. From this definition, Vincent infers that technical progress is slow, but what is true of economic productivity is not true of technical progress in general. If one considers technique shorn of one whole part, and that it's most progressive, one can indeed assert that it is slow in its progress. This abstraction is even more illusory when one claims to measure technical progress. The definition proposed by Forazzi is inexact, because it excludes everything which does not refer to production, and all effects which are not economic. The tendency to reduce the technical problem to the dimensions of the technique of production is also present in the works of so enlightened a scholar as Georges Friedman. In his introduction to the UNESCO Colloquium on Technique, he appears to start out with a very broad definition, but in the second paragraph, without warning, he begins to reduce everything to the level of economic production. What gives rise to this limitation of the problem? One factor might be a tacit optimism, a need to hold that technical progress is unconditionally valid, which leads to the selection of the most positive aspect of technical progress, as though it were its only one. This may have guided Fortzi, but it does not seem to hold true in Friedman's case. I believe that the reasoning behind Friedman's way of thinking is to be found in the turn of the scientific mind. All aspects, mechanical, economic, psychological, sociological, of the techniques of production have been subjected to innumerable specialized studies. As a result, we are beginning to learn in a more precise and scientific way about the relationships between man and the industrial machine. Since the scientist must use the materials he has at hand, and since almost nothing is known about the relationship of man to the automobile, the telephone, or the radio, and absolutely nothing about the relationship of man to the apparat, or about the sociological effects of other aspects of technique, the scientist moves unconsciously toward the sphere of what is known scientifically, and tries to limit the whole question to that. There is another element in this scientific attitude, only that it is knowable, which is expressed, or at least can be expressed, in numbers. To get away from the so-called arbitrary and subjective, to escape ethical and literary judgments, which, as everyone knows, are trivial and unfounded, the scientist must get back to numbers. What, after all, can one hope to deduce from the purely qualitative statement that the worker is fatigued? But when biochemistry makes it possible to measure fatigability numerically, it is at last possible to take account of the worker's fatigue. Then there is hope of finding a solution. However, an entire realm of effects of technique, indeed the largest, is not reducible to numbers. And it is precisely that realm which we are investigating in this work. Yet since what can be said about it is apparently not to be taken seriously, it is better for the scientist to shut his eyes and regard it as a realm of pseudo-problems, or simply as non-existent. The scientific position frequently consists of denying the existence of whatever does not belong to current scientific method. The problem of the industrial machine, however, is a numerical one in nearly all its aspects. Hence, all of technique is unintentionally reduced to a numerical question. In the case of Vincent, this is intentional, as his definition shows. We embrace in technical progress all kinds of progress, provided that they are treatable numerically in a reliable way. I like this statement. The scientific position frequently consists of denying the existence of whatever does not belong to current scientific method. That's a sick quote there. I'm gonna have to write that bitch down. I'm writing that down. I'm 18. The scientific position frequently consists of denying the existence of whatever belong to current scientific method. I like that one. I think he's attacking the people, the atheists. Truth throws back. H.D. Laswell's definition of technique as the ensemble of practices by which one uses available resources in order to achieve certain valued ends also seems to follow the convention cited above and to embrace only industrial technique. Here it might be contested whether technique does indeed permit the realization of values. However, to judge from Laswell's examples, he conceives the terms of his definition in an extremely broad manner. He gives a list of values and the corresponding techniques. As values, for example, he lists riches, power, well-being, affection, and as techniques, the techniques of government, production, medicine, the family, and so on. Laswell's conception of value may seem somewhat strange. The term is obviously not apt, but what he has to say indicates that he gives techniques their full scope. Moreover, He makes it quite clear that it is necessary to show the effects of technique not only on inanimate objects, but also on people. I am, therefore, in substantial agreement with this conception. Technical operation and technical phenomenon. With the use of these few guideposts, we can now try to formulate a full definition, at least an approximate definition of technique. But we must keep this in mind. We are not concerned with the different individual techniques. Everyone practices a particular technique, and it is difficult to come to know them all. Yet, in this great diversity, we can find certain points in common, certain tendencies, and principles shared by them all. It is clumsy to call these common features technique with a capital T. No one would recognize his particular technique behind this terminology. Nevertheless, it takes account of reality, the technical phenomenon, which is worldwide today. If we recognize that the method each person employs to attain a result is, in fact, his particular technique, the problem of means is raised. In fact, technique is nothing more than means and the ensemble of means. This, of course, does not lessen the importance of the problem. Our civilization is first and foremost a civilization of means. In the reality of modern life, the means, it would seem, are more important than the ends. Any other assessment of the situation is mere idealism. Techniques considered as methods of operation present certain common characteristics and certain general tendencies, but we cannot devote ourselves exclusively to them. To do this would lead to a more specialized study than I have in mind. The technical phenomenon is much more complex than any synthesis of characteristics common to individual techniques. If we desire to come closer to a definition of technique, we must in fact differentiate between the technical operation and the technical phenomenon. The technical operation includes every operation carried out in accordance with a certain method in order to attain a particular end. It can be as rudimentary as splintering a flint or as complicated as programming an electronic brain. In every case, it is the method which characterizes the operation. It may be more or less effective or more or less complex, but its nature is always the same. It is this which leads us to think that there is a continuity of technical operations and that only the great refinement resulting from scientific progress differentiates the modern technical operation from the primitive one. Every operation obviously entails a certain technique, even the gathering of fruit among primitive peoples, climbing the tree, picking the fruit as quickly and with as little effort as possible, distinguishing between the ripe and the unripe fruit, and so on. However, what characteristics technical action within a particular activity is the search for greater efficiency? Completely natural and spontaneous effort is replaced by a complex of acts designed to improve, say, the yield. It is this which prompts the creation of technical forms, starting from the simple forms of activity. These technical forms are not necessarily more complicated than the spontaneous ones, but they are more efficient and better adapted. Thus, technique creates means, but the technical operation still occurs on the same level as that of the worker who does the work. The skilled worker, like the primitive huntsman, remains a technical operator. Their attitudes differ only to a small degree. What's up, Bond? I'm gonna do some pull-ups real quick. I just went to do some pull-ups. I just went and did pull-ups. I'm just reading a book. It said some interesting shit about... I sent you a DM on Twitter. I was just trying to write... The scientific position frequently consists of denying the existence of whatever does not belong to current scientific method. I think that's a pretty cool quote. He's talking about how science tries to like reduce everything to numbers, and basically if it can't be reduced to numbers, science can't like understand it, so like the problem doesn't exist, kind of, and they don't even think about it. I have no decorations. People think I'm a school shit. It's just like white walls, dude. I don't have. It's just like fire. Well, I have like stuff. I have like a cat tree and cat toys, but then it's just like furniture and a computer, a TV, a PlayStation. And that's it. All right, we're talking about technique. But two factors enter into the extensive field of technical operation: consciousness and judgment. This double intervention produces what I call the technical phenomenon. What characterizes this double intervention? Essentially, it takes what was previously tentative, unconscious, and spontaneous, and brings it into the realm of clear, voluntary, and reasoned concepts. I was like... I've never been into like decorating. I'm always doing shit. Okay, when I hate these French words. I can't pronounce any of this shit. When Andre Leri-Gourhan tabulates the efficiency of Zulu swords and arrows in terms of the most up-to-date knowledge of weaponry, he is doing his work that is obviously different from that of the swordsmith of Buchanland, who created the form of the sword. The swordsmith's choice of form was unconscious and spontaneous, although it can now be justified by numerical calculations. Such calculations had no place whatever in the technical operation he performed, but reason did inevitably enter into the process because man spontaneously imitates nature in his activities. Accomplishments that merely copy nature, however, have no future. For instance, the imitation of birds' wings from Icarus to Adder. Reason makes it possible to produce objects in terms of certain features, certain abstract requirements, and this in turn leads not to imitation of nature, but to the ways of technique. The intervention of rational judgment in the technical operation has important consequences. Man becomes aware that it is possible to find new and different means. Reason upsets pragmatic traditions and creates new operational methods and new tools. It examines rationally the possibilities of more extensive and less rigid experimentation. Reason in these ways multiplies technical operations to a high degree of diversity, but it also operates in the opposite direction. It considers results and takes account of fixed end of technique efficiency. It notes what every means devised is capable of accomplishing and selects from the various means at its disposal with a view to securing the ones that are the most efficient, the best adapted to the desired end. Thus, the multiplicity of means is reduced to one, the most efficient, and here reason appears clearly in the guise of technique. In addition, I think he's trying to say that diversity is better than if having like the one most efficient thing. Because what's good about diversity is the future is uncertain, right? And new circumstances could arise where something becomes better because of the new circumstances. So if you have more diversity, you can adapt to, like, I don't know, a natural disaster or something better than if you're all just like trying to be the most efficient and do everything the same. Like, I think diversity is a strength that I guess it gets kind of ignored by technique because technique is about efficiency. And one thing I like about Christianity is God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So there's diversity in God. So if God is diverse, then it's good for us to be diverse and have different beliefs, different opinions. That's a strength. It's not a weakness. And it's like a sickness where you try and get people to think exactly like you think. It means you're probably a victim of propaganda. In addition, there is the intervention of consciousness. Consciousness shows clearly, and to everybody, the advantages of technique and what it can accomplish. The technician takes stock of alternative possibilities. The immediate result is that he seeks to apply the new methods in fields which traditionally have been left to chance, pragmatism, and instinct. The intervention of consciousness causes a rapid, far-flung extension of technique. That's interesting. The twofold intervention of reason and consciousness in the technical world, which produces the technical phenomenon, can be described as the quest of the one best means in every field. And this one best means is in fact the technical means. It is in the aggregate of these means that produces technical civilization. I remember back in the day, this reminds me of when I played StarCraft, and we'd sit in the chat room, and like there's this one chat like all the best players would go to, and they would like debate and argue what is the best strategy. And what's great about StarCraft is you could actually see who is right. Like, I think this is the best. I think this is the best. Then you fucking battle to see who wins, right? There's actually a winner. When we debate whatever topic on the internet, there's never really a winner, right? That's definitive. So people would always argue like this is the best strategy, that's the best strategy. And I would always argue there is no best strategy. And I'd be like, be like water and adapt to your situation and shit like that. Because I was like obsessed with Bruce Lee. The technical phenomenon is the main preoccupation of our time. In every field, men seek to find the most efficient method. But our investigations have reached a limit. It is no longer the best relative means which counts, as compared to other means also in use. The choice is less and less a subjective one among several means which are potentially applicable. It is really a question of finding the best means in the absolute sense on the basis of numerical calculation. That's been happening, dude. That happened in sports too, like analytics, right? Analytics changed baseball, basketball. I don't know about football, but it's probably changing football because they got a bunch of like math nerds to crunch numbers, and they started like this team. There's like a movie about it. A baseball team hired these math nerds. They crunched numbers and analytics, and they found like some stat that people weren't thinking was a good stat, or I don't know. And so they got all these players like cheap because no one thought they had value, but they could see the value in the statistics that the other team. And anyways, their team would just like win all these World Series, and so analytics became a big thing in sports, and that's like technique. It is then the specialist who chooses the means. He is able to carry out the calculations that demonstrate the superiority of the means chosen over all others. Thus, a science of means comes into being, a science of techniques progressively elaborated. This science extends to greatly diverse areas. It ranges from the act of shaving to the act of organizing the landing in Normandy, or to cremating thousands of deportees. Today, no human activity escapes this technical imperative. There is a technique of organization. The great fact of organization described by Toynbee fits very well into this conception of the technical phenomenon. Just as there is a technique of friendship and a technique of swimming, under the circumstances, it is easy to see how far we are from confusing technique and machine, and if we examine the broader areas where this search for means is taking place, we find three principal subdivisions of modern technique, in addition to the mechanical, which is the most conspicuous but which I shall not discuss because it is so well known, and to the forms of intellectual technique, card indices, libraries, and so on. Okay, these are the subdivisions. 1. Economic technique is almost entirely subordinated to production and ranges from the organization of labor to economic planning. This technique differs from the others in its object and goal, but its problems are the same as those of all other technical activities. 2. The technique of organization concerns the great masses and applies not only to commercial and industrial affairs of magnitude, coming consequently under the jurisdiction of the economic, but also to states and to administration and police power. This organizational technique is also applied to warfare and ensures the power of an army at least as much as its weapons. Everything in the legal field also depends on organizational technique. 3. Human technique takes various forms, ranging all the way from medicine and genetics to propaganda, pedagogical techniques, vocational guidance, publicity, etc. Here man himself becomes the object of technique. We observe in the case of each of these subdivisions that the subordinate techniques may be very different in kind and not necessarily similar one to another as techniques. They have the same goal and preoccupation, however, and are thus related. The three subdivisions show the wide extent of the technical phenomenon. In fact, nothing at all escapes technique today. There is no field where technique is not dominant. This is easy to say and is scarcely surprising. We are so habituated to machines that there seems to be nothing left to discover. Here the fact of technique has the fact of technique no intrinsic importance? Does it spring merely from the march of time? Or does it represent a problem peculiar to our times? Our discussion of the biology of technique will bring us face to face with this question. But first, we must survey in detail the vast field which the technical phenomenon covers, in order to become fully cognizant of what it signify. I can't talk. In order to become fully cognizant. In order to become fully cognizant of what it signifies. Sweet. Whatever. That's a good amount of reading. I'll read more later. I might do. I could do a drama stream and talk about Smokey being wrong, but I don't know. He's so blatantly wrong, so much. He's like kind of the same shit. So, but this other guy did a stream rebuking Smokey, and he made good points. So I thought about uploading that. I might do that.